For day 25, the instruction says that we are to select a computed column called supplier key reference, which is a combination of supplier key, dash, and supplier reference, supplier category, primary contact rather, where is finalized as false and supplier is not unknown. So I believe we have supplier key, then this dash hyphen, then we have all the other things concatenated together. I think that makes sense. Then we have the whiteboard importers database. That's the database that we're going to be using for this challenge. And we'll be using the dimension supplier table and the fact transaction table. So let's head over to Power BI. So the first step, as usual, is to connect to the data source. And for this analysis, we'll be selecting just the supplier table. Since include relationship is enabled, it means that we don't need to what's the word for it? Import the two tables that we want to use. So one of the first steps that we can take here right now is to expand the second table, which is a table coming from the transaction table. What we need from the transaction table is just is finalized column. We uncheck the option to use this and click on OK. Then we have the if finalized column. Then there are two conditions that need to be met. The first condition says that where is finalized is false and supplier is not unknown. So is finalized has to be false and the supplier should not be unknown. Supplier should not be unknown. Great. So we have the two columns. As the two columns, we've applied the two conditions that we've been asked to apply. Up next, we just need to select the columns that we want to work with. So we want to work with the supplier. Let me just go to choose columns. We need a supplier key, supplier category, the primary contact, supplier reference. We don't need the is finalized column anymore because we've been able to use it for the purpose for which we expanded it. Then click on OK. So now we have the supplier key, supplier category, and primary contact, then supplier reference. So we need to concatenate these columns together. So for example, what we can do is to just select all the columns and merge, but there's an order to this. We need to bring the supplier reference next to the supplier key. I'm not making a mistake. That's what's supposed to, yeah. Supplier key, then supplier reference. That's correct. Supplier key, supplier reference, supplier category, and primary contact. Then we can just choose to concatenate. That's a concatenate. We can choose to merge these columns together, right? So if we merge these columns together at the moment, you see that everything is packed together, and you will also notice that query folding is no longer working. Query folding has been disabled. And one of the reasons where query folding, the reason query folding was disabled is because of this type conversion that is happening. We don't want the type conversion to happen in here. We want it to happen before this step. So what we can do is to apply the type conversion first, convert the supplier key to text. And now when we combine these columns, you see that query folding is still working fine. But that's not all. Based on the instruction we have here, we are told that there should be a hyphen or a dash between supplier and all the other columns, right? So we need to account for that. So we are combining columns. These are all the columns. And so we can't use this approach if we want to add something different. So I'll explore another approach and see how that works out. Combiner, because this one is asking us to combine, and this is going to add a hyphen before all the other ones, and we don't want that to happen. One way we can go about that is to combine the other columns first, then combine into the final column. So let's do that. So we come to this step and combine these columns first. So if you combine, see, supplier, and primary contact, we merge these columns first. Now we have the supplier and merge columns. Let me confirm query folding is still enabled. We can now merge these two columns separately. Merge, and this time around we can add a separator. And we can rename this column to, let me see, supplier reference key. Let me copy this. Supplier reference key. Then click on OK. And now we see that we've solved the problem, right? We have this, let me see, 17, 20, then the supplier reference, then comma, then. So something else we may want to consider is how to treat the spaces, right? Because when we combined these columns, let me see. Yeah. When we combine this column, realize that there are spaces between the names. So you have these, there's a little space before the next one, and there are some spaces here. So there was no instruction to either remove the spaces or leave the spaces. So I'm just going to leave this as it is. So we can also confirm that query folding is working fine. Yeah, so I think with this, we've been able to solve the challenge really. We've been able to solve the challenge, except if you want to go the extra step to say, okay, I want to remove some spaces, I don't want spaces here and stuff. Yeah, but without that, you've solved the problem, and that brings us to the end of the challenge for day 25. Yeah, don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.